Hello everyone and welcome back to the video. Today we're going to be taking a look at the top 5 most underrated civilizations in Age of Empires 2. Now what I mean by underrated is simply these civilizations being a lot stronger than what the majority will perceive them as. Keep in mind these aren't top civilizations or the best civilizations in the game. They're just going to be doing better than what most people would expect them to. Alright, let's go ahead and hop right into the list. Alright, starting off at number 5, we've got the Incas. Now, the Incas are the forgotten Mesociv, as I like to call them. And I know some of you guys will say they're not Meso technically, but whatever. They got Eagle Warriors, so they are Meso in my books when it comes to Age of Empires. But yeah, the Incas are actually really strong civilization that often goes under the radar because they're not as strong as Mayans or Aztecs in most cases. However, Incas are quite unique. They're different than Mayans and Aztecs. Mayans and Aztecs have some strengths and some weaknesses, but Incas are way more well-rounded. If you consider what the Incas have to offer, it's pretty much everything. They've got slingers and castle age to counter any infantry. They've got a really solid arbalest line fully upgraded, so you can go into that. Skirmishers with a unique tech associated with them. They've got eagle warriors with a lot of pierce armor. They've got Kamyuks which shred cavalry and infantry. They've got champions. They have halberdier as well if they need those. They've got siege ram. I mean, the list goes on and on with what Incas can go for. They've got good monks. They've got a really smooth economy when it comes to early game, so they save on the houses. You need half the houses as you normally do. That saves you on build time of the houses and the actual cost of the house, which is 25 wood. And they also get the extra llama, which helps out a little bit in the early game as well. So like 2 early game economy bonuses, both pretty small but both pretty decent. So the point of Incas is that you've got a really solid early game with your economy bonuses. You have eagle warrior access because it's a mesociv, and then you also have a really broad tech tree. So no matter what you're facing, you're gonna have somewhat of an answer to it. And I personally consider Incas the civilization that can pretty much beat any other civilization if you play perfectly. However, it is a tough civ to play perfectly because they don't have any overpowered bonuses or anything that gets you way ahead of your opponent just by default. You have to play smart and you have to play calculated. Moving on to number 4, this civilization often gets disregarded, but I think it's a really strong civilization on a variety of maps, and that is the Koreans. Now, the Koreans are great on water maps, they're good on nomad style maps because of the line of sight of the villagers, and they're even good on Arabia, which is something that a lot of people wouldn't agree with me on that statement. However, I just feel like Koreans, they get a lot of things going for them. For example, right off the gate, you have the armor on your archers and skirmishers, which is a pretty huge advantage at all stages of the game, especially in Imp when you get that +4 pierce armor on your archers or skirmishers right away. It's pretty solid if it's an archer versus archer fight or a skirm versus skirm fight. Not only that, we also get a discount on all wood units, so right away if you open with a range, you have that double bonus going on, and I'm a huge fan of double bonuses because that just means that you tend to overpower your opponent if they only have one bonus or even no bonuses at all. So with your archer opening or the skirm opening with Koreans, you save some wood and you get the free armor, really solid stuff. And then going on to like castle age and onwards, you get free guard tower, which is really solid to put the pressure and start claiming the map. You also get free keep and imp, so you can continue that pressure with towers. And then your unique unit, the war wagon, is absolutely beastly. It's pretty much good against everything except monk and skirm. So if you're going up against heavy monks or heavy skirms, war wagon isn't great. But then again, Koreans are completely fine dealing with skirmishers because you got your own skirms, you got bomber cannons, you got siege onagers. So skirmishers are really not a problem, and war wagons will deal with pretty much everything else. If you're dealing against monks as well, like heavy monks, you could actually opt to go Korean Hussar. It sounds dumb because Korean Hussar isn't a good unit in general, but if your opponent is just on like something silly like pure monks and a little bit of halberdier, you can use the Hussar and just send them in, trade them versus expensive monks, and then use your arbalest or war wagons to clean up everything else. So it is an option that the civilization has, and it's definitely worth mentioning, and it's a Hera video, so you know I'm going to talk about Hussars anyways. But yeah, overall, Koreans are just a late game powerhouse that have a decent early game and have really smooth transitions throughout the ages. I do think if you're playing the civilization, you have to think outside the box. You have to use some really smart positional play with the towers or the siege to get ahead of your opponent. But if you can manage that, Koreans are really scary and hard to deal with. Alright, next up on the list, I've got the Malians. Now, Malians for me were a really discarded civilization, almost forgotten. After the change to make their gold last longer and take away their gold mining upgrade, I really didn't enjoy the civ because it felt a little off to me. However, recently I've kind of felt like the gold lasting longer upgrade, or bonus rather, definitely has its place in the game and for the civ. Now, the thing about Malians that I have to mention, or else I'd be disingenuous, is that the late game is very awkward. They don't really have any power units, but they have a bunch of different gold units that that could mesh together very nicely. So for example, they've got the Farimba Cavalier, the Farimba Camel. That's a really strong unit, but then again, not like overpowered strong where it's going to carry the game. They've got hand cannoneers, they've got bomber cannons, they've got Arbalest, but you're lacking Bracer. They also got champions, but you're lacking Blast Furnace. However, the champions do get extra Pierce Armor. So you can see how it's a little bit of a trade-off here and there. You got Siege Onagers, but you're lacking Siege Engineers. So you're always lacking one key upgrade for your units. However, if you start mixing these units, if you go like hand cannoneer plus Farimba Camel or hand cannoneer plus Farimba Cavalier, you can see that your army will be extremely strong, and you can afford to mix a lot of gold units because you have that longer lasting gold. You also have really strong monks and siege, so monks, bomber cannon can easily help out your composition. And like I said, because you have that extra gold, Malian late game ends up being quite strong. But you can't play the civilization in a standard way because you don't have any one unit that will just completely carry the game, like I said. So definitely make sure to mix gold units if you want to have success with the Malians. Next up, we've got at number 2, the Persians. Now, I personally think that the Persians are one of the lower tier Arabia civs. I want to put that out there. However, I think there's a way to play Persians that actually makes them really strong, and that is the 1 or 2 TC play. Now, the thing I don't like about Persians on Arabia is that your economy bonus, which makes your town centers work faster, that actually sucks when you're on 3 TC. It makes it so you can't afford to make 3 TC production and army at the same time. It's just too hard to afford it. Your villas get pumped out way too fast, so then you're forced to like idle your town centers, which wastes your advantage. Like your whole bonus is to make villas faster, so if you're idling your town center, then you're just not making use of that. And so the way I figured out to go around this and to make use of this is to stay on 1 TC or 2 TCs, and you get extra villagers. You're gonna be like 1, 2, 3 ahead of your opponent if he's on the same TC count in Castlage. And even if he's got 3 TCs, you're probably gonna keep up in vill count for a while if you're on 2 TCs with Persians. So the idea is, with the extra resources that we save from not making the 3rd town center, we're gonna use those into military, and that lets us put pressure on our opponent while having a very smooth 1 TC or 2 TC economy back home. This is a great way to develop your economy with Persians while also keeping a lot of pressure on your opponents. And if they just go 3 TC right away, they might get overwhelmed by your 2 TC pressure, and your economy behind it is surprisingly good. So for me, the Persians are really bad civ if you try to play standard 3 TC, but if you mix it up and stay on 1 or 2 TC, they're quite a strong civ. Again, still not a top civ at all, but just they will perform a little bit better than what you're expecting of them. They're also insanely good on other maps like Nomad and some hybrid maps, so I figured I'd put them up at number 2 for some of the most underrated civs in the game. Alright, before I talk about number 1, I've got an honorable mention, and honestly, if it wasn't for Nomad, I would put Spanish on this list. But Spanish are amazing on Nomad, everyone knows that. They're also amazing on some other maps because of Conquistadors, and they kind of just dominate some of the Nomad meta right now. However, Spanish are still underrated on Arabia. I always say that they're not the worst civilization in the game. People might think they are. I also rate them quite low, but recently, like very recently, I've come to realize that Spanish are really not that bad on Arabia, especially in the current meta that tends to be a little bit more light cap and bunk oriented. Spanish actually do quite fine getting by. They also have an insanely strong late game, and so I figured for me, Spanish is just not the worst Arabia civ, and I don't think it's close to the worst Arabia civ. I think it's like there's probably like 5 or 10 civilizations that are worse than the Spanish on Arabia, and I think that Spanish are just a civilization that you have to be smart with. Once again, you can't always default to Conquistador because that's very predictable, so you have to mix it up. Sometimes you go for Conks, which is very powerful, sometimes for another strategy, and sometimes you got to pull out the missionaries if you want to win the game. Alright, finally at number 1, I think a lot of you guys might have guessed this one. It's pretty obvious, but I'm gonna say it anyways. It's the Burmese. This civilization is ridiculously strong for how weak people think it is. It's ridiculous. I mean, people look at their skirms and they're like, oh, we're missing the last armor upgrade. How do we deal with Arbalest? It's impossible. I'm just like, what? We skipped half the game. Why are we dealing with Arbalest? We're still in Dark Age. When you get to Feudal Age, you get the Freewood upgrade. You get extra attack on your men at arms if you want to go for that, or you can not go for men at arms because that's predictable and go for something else and have your opponent think that you're gonna go for men at arms. Then when you get to Castle Age, you get Bow Saw for free. Imperial Age, you get 2-man Saw for free. So you're getting a ton of free wood upgrades, and that lets you develop your economy insanely quickly. You can easily use that wood upgrade to go for an all-in push with monks, which is very strong with Burmese. You can use that free wood upgrade to add town centers faster and make your economy super smooth. You can easily play crossbows in castle, just because you do get like bracer, so your crossbows scale a little bit decently into Imperial Age, but they're not the best. I'm not gonna say they're the best, but you can go crossbows and then transition to something else in Imperial Age. Their Arambai are really strong right now, so you have that 1 power unit for late game. If you can just get a good boom with the crossbows, switch into Arambai, you're feeling pretty good. And how to deal with Arbalest Arbalest, you have onagers with Burmese. You can just go onagers into Arambai or onagers into something like Cavalier, and you can easily deal with Arbalest. Arbalest are not that scary with Burmese. And you might be thinking, well, how do I deal with strong crossbow civs? Just go skirms. You're missing one armor. That's fine. Sure, I understand. But you have a good economy. Just go for some skirms, go for some defensive mangonels, mix skirms and mangonels, and your opponent can't do anything with that crossbow ball. So Burmese dying to archer civs is completely fake. Of course, they still struggle against the best archer civs like Britons and stuff, of course. However, if they're playing cavalry with their late game unique tech that gives them extra damage as archers, and they have a few skirms and siege mixed in, Burmese would just get by fine versus Arbalest. It's kind of a myth that they die to Arbalest at this point. And the one secret weapon for Burmese that completely destroys archer civs is the elephant. If your opponent isn't on halberdier and you switch to elephants, mass like 20-30 of them, surprise your opponent with the switch, and you're gonna win the game easily in late game with those elephants. And it's possible since Burmese see all the relics on the map. If you play for the relics in mid game, you will have the gold available to do those big elephant or Arambai pushes in Imperial Age. Alright, that's gonna do it for my top 5 underrated civilizations. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know if there's any other underrated civs that you think I missed out, or if you disagree or agree with the list in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.